Parturition is the final stage of gestation. It is when we are getting ready for labor, which is going to allow the baby to move out of the mother. So when we talk about parturition, it is controlled by hormones. And the first thing that happens in this cascade of events that occurs that allows for labor to happen is that we have an increase in fetal cortisol. Cortisol is, you might know, is a steroid hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands. And we actually have cortisol in our bodies. It's our stress hormone. It's also highest like in the morning when we get up from bed, we get up, our cortisol levels are high, they get us up to do something. So cortisol is also important in initiating this process of parturition. So this then causes an increase in estrogen production by the placenta. This increase in estrogen production does a couple of things. It increases the synthesis of prostaglandins. And we talked about prostaglandins earlier because prostaglandins are found in semen. This is what causes vaginal contractions, but here it's going to lead to the contractions of the uterus. So this leads to rhythmic contractions of the uterus. This increase in estrogen production is also going to cause the uterus to develop oxytocin receptors. So the uterus develops oxytocin. Oxytocin is a hormone that is our feel-good hormone. It is actually that which is responsible for touch, the sensation of feel-good touch. Hugging increases oxytocin. And it is believed to be really important in bonding between individuals. So the uterus develops oxytocin receptors on its myometrium. So that is the smooth muscle. So this is going to eventually, when oxytocin is released, this is going to actually cause a increase in contractile force. So this increases the force of contractions. So when the later on in pregnancy, you might get what is called false labor. And sometimes these are called Braxton Hicks contractions. So they start and they're not very, they don't feel very strong, and they don't like happen in a regular pattern. So false labor is when you feel a tightening of the uterus, but it's not like intense, and it is not like you can't count seconds between them. So it's not regular contraction. So we have that, what is called false labor. And that is because all of this is happening within the uterus. Okay, so when we look at a diagram that shows this process, we could go to our whiteboard. Okay, fetal cortisol. This is actually a cortisol releasing hormone that increases fetal cortisol. We have an increase in placental estrogens. This increases prostaglandins being produced. And then this also induces oxytocin receptors on the uterus. So when the baby is ready to be born, we have this feedback, this positive feedback loop that is going to continually cause more forceful contractions. So when we talk about labor, I'll go back to my other page. we'll talk about labor or giving birth, we see that with a contraction, we get an increase in the release of oxytocin. So contractions cause the fetal head to press against the cervix. This pressing against the cervix, as well as the changes in hormones, is going to cause the cervix to become thin and dilated. So the cervix thins and dilates. As this process continues, the contractions actually increase oxytocin release. And this increases the strength of the contractions. This is one of the few examples of a positive feedback. It is not designed to maintain homeostasis. It is designed to ultimately force the baby out through the birth canal. So this is a positive feedback mechanism. One of the really interesting things about this oxytocin is that in natural childbirth, there are mechanisms to increase the release of oxytocin. So like some people say, stimulate the mother's nipples, and the stimulation of the nipples might actually cause more oxytocin to be released, which might speed up labor. In order to speed up labor without using touch or other natural mechanisms, you can use what is called Pitocin. So Pitocin is synthetic oxytocin. So this synthetic oxytocin will act just like oxytocin. So they'll put it maybe in your IV drip, and then all of a sudden, boom, your contractions start to progress and speed up, and it might actually cause labor to happen really, really fast, which is not necessarily a good thing because the baby's head gets deformed possibly. And then there's also problems with the tearing of the perineal, the muscle between the vagina and the anus. And so Pitocin is good to use, but maybe not as often as it is used. So maybe we need to realize that natural labor might take days rather than in and out of the hospital within 24 hours. So let's look back at our whiteboard. So here we see, this is the cervix right here. So the cervix stretches. This causes that pressing of the fetal head, causes more release of oxytocin from the mother's pituitary gland. And this causes stronger uterine contractions until ultimately we're going to have the baby move out of the birth canal. And that moving out of the birth canal is very interesting. Let me see if I can copy a picture in here. Let's get it bigger. Oh, I can't get it any bigger than that. That's interesting. Let's see, control plus. Nope. Okay. Let me see if I can get the final stages right here. Okay, so this is the final stage. So the baby, in order to fit through, this is the female's pelvis. So like this is the pubic symphysis right here. And then we also have like the tailbone right here. And no, the pubic symphysis is right here. The baby has to like rotate and turn. And you'll notice that this baby is coming out head first. It's much harder to give birth to a baby that is breech, where they're coming out butt first. And so generally the doctors try to get the baby to move into its proper alignment And they can do that sometimes by massaging and kind of forcing the baby to move, to turn, so that it's ready for being born. And so this right here is shows that the perineum. So this is the movement of the baby. You can see the umbilical cord, and you can also see the placenta back here. And so after the baby is born, uterine contractions will continue to happen because we have to give birth to the placenta, essentially. So this is the placenta. The placenta detaches naturally, and then this will come out of the mother. And what is left here is kind of a wound that is going to have to heal over where the placenta detaches. And in the past, this might have been a source of maternal mortality, where we would have hemorrhaging. So we might bleed excessively and they would hemorrhage, and that could lead to not losing so much blood that they go into hypovolemic shock, and then they might die from it. And so this placenta will come out. It's really interesting. They have now, my niece, for example, they saved their placenta and actually ate it. That's kind of interesting. They can dry it, you can eat it. Other animals, other organisms will eat their placenta. The umbilical cord has fetal stem cells in it. So there is the possibility of taking some of those stem cells and sending them to a lab to be processed and then stored. So that is called stem cell banking. And you can do it at a cost for your offspring if you want them to have stem cells stored away for them to use if they ever need them. You could also just donate your umbilical cord to stem cell research and to be used in other stem cell therapies. Okay, so that is the whole process of embryonic development, parturition, and then the last stage, the giving, delivering the placenta out through the vagina.